Thank you all for attending this afternoon. We appreciate it, and we're looking forward to sharing with you a regional energy workshop that is being funded through the Green Communities Program, funded to the Northern Middlesex Council of Governments. My name is Jenny Raitt. I'm the Executive Director here. And for those of you who are not familiar with MCOG, we are the regional planning agency. We're one of 13 such agencies in Massachusetts. And we cover basically Greater Lowell, which includes Billerica, Chelmsford, Dracut, Dunstable, Lowell, Pepperell, Tewksbury, Kingsborough, and Westford. And our planning region and objectives include land use goals, environmental protection, energy, economic development, housing, public health, public safety, and municipal service delivery, as well as transportation, because we also staff the Metropolitan Planning Organization. And we're very excited about today's workshop. As you can see, it is called Achieving Climate Goals Through Energy Savings Programs. And we're going to hear from a great slate of presenters today and have a discussion as well about these different types of programs. I also want to introduce to all of you Daniela Garcia Moreno. She is our new sustainability planner, and she is able to work with all of our municipalities and other partners on achieving these climate goals. Today's workshop is going to cover the energy savings programs and the resources that are available to both assist households who make low or moderate or even middle incomes, as well as municipalities, all in an effort to achieve state climate goals. The workshop today is a panel discussion, and so we'll have time at the end for some Q&A. So if you do have a question, you can put it into our chat. We are going to hear from Brian Biot, who is the Director of Energy Efficiency Operations at Action Inc., as well as Larry Bevere, who is the Director of Energy Conservation Programs at Community Teamwork Inc. And Community Teamwork is based here in Lowell. So some of the programs that Brian will talk about, as well as Larry, some apply to a lot of our communities, but there are opportunities to hear more about the energy efficiency opportunities for households who make lower incomes, as well as developers of certain types of housing. We're also going to hear from Amanda Formica, who is the Senior Analyst on the Massachusetts Customer Energy Management Team at National Grid, and Beverly Craig, who is Lead AP BD&C. She's the Senior Program Manager at the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center. And then the last presenter will be Denise Rouleau, who is Lead AP and also a PMP, who will discuss the Mass Save Moderate Income HVAC and Barrier Mitigation Rebate programs. She's also the Lead Program Manager for Commercial New Construction at National Grid. And followed by that, we're going to, again, have some Q&A. So hopefully you'll have some questions that we can address. Next slide, please. I'm going to hand it over now to Brian and Larry, who are going to talk about CTI, I believe. And I don't see Larry.
I'm not sure if he's present here, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Do we have other attendees present besides our speakers here? Or are they not shown here?
We have a couple of other attendees present.
Okay. Okay, so my name is Brian Biot. I'm the Director of Energy Efficiency Operations at Action Incorporated. We are a nonprofit anti-poverty agency that's based out of Gloucester, Massachusetts. Don't let that fool you, though. We are the lead vendor for National Grid in the income eligible programs here in Massachusetts, part of the Mass Save program. And as such, we oversee and work with 17 or so community action agencies, of which CTI is one based in Lowell, Massachusetts, to deliver the income eligible programs in the 1 to 4 unit or single family program. We also implement the multifamily program for National Grid, both in the gas and electric realms throughout the state. So my agency, Action Incorporated, is very active in working in the city of Lowell, as well as the surrounding communities that were aforementioned by Jenny. So my plan here is to give you a brief overview of the network, which is called LEAN, the Low Income Energy Affordability Network. That is the network of community action agencies that deliver these programs throughout the state. And what it is we do, we each, for each investor-owned utility that exists in the state of Massachusetts, there is a lead vendor. Action is lead vendor for National Grid, ABCD in Boston, lead vendor for Eversource and EGMA. And we partner with a number of other agencies to deliver these programs. We're very robustly funded by the PAs. And we also receive funding from the federal government, from both the Health and Human Services and Department of Energy to do energy efficiency measures. In terms of the multifamily program, I oversee day-to-day operations of the multifamily program for National Grid. So multifamily is defined as 5+ units, anything ranging, including 5 units and above with no upward limit, qualifies for the income eligible multifamily program. There are a number of ways to qualify the building. We handle and work with public housing and as well as for-profit and nonprofit entities. Public housing and nonprofit entities are usually easier to qualify because they're deed restricted or have affordability agreements in place. For profits, there's a number of ways to demonstrate affordability, not the least of which is discount rate. That's a very simple one. We have once that is let me back up for a moment. So to apply, we have a website, and there is an online application. The Lien Clearinghouse will verify all this information with their ownership and management entities, and then from there they get deemed up for services. We have a full suite of practical measures. So I'm losing my train of thought. We have a full suite of practical measures. So once a site is deemed eligible for services, we'll have an energy professional go out to the site, conduct an entire full energy assessment for all cost-effective measures. This includes, but is not limited to, lighting fixtures and lamps in common areas. So think hallways, stairwells, parking lots, security lighting, things of that nature. Appliances, building shell work to include air sealing and insulation, domestic hot water systems, and any kind of heating systems, air source heat pumps, boilers, furnaces. We range from, as far as the housing stock goes, from campus style housing, garden style apartments, all the way up to mid and high rise buildings. So that's multifamily in a nutshell. As far as the single family program goes, we cater to homeowners as well as renters. We're looking at single family detached homes and up to 3 and 4 unit buildings. 50% rule applies there as well. If at least half of the building is income eligible, we can serve the entire building holistically with all the services aforementioned. And we have a number of contractors. So in order to work in the income eligible programs, these contractors need to go through a pretty rigorous background check process in order to work on PA funded work. Once that is done, they sign a contract with the local agencies. And once energy assessments are completed, we use what's called a quarterbacking model. The agency personnel oversee the job from start to finish. So once the assessment is complete, we develop a work scope, and we will assign the said work scope to various contractors in order to execute work. That includes pre-weatherization barriers like knob and tube mitigation, roof repair and replacement. Then we'll oversee a weatherization work scope that handles the entire shell, and a heating work scope. Appliances are also contracted and delivered through our services, and we have instant savings measures that are installed by the home energy professional. That stuff includes like LED lamps, thermostats, power strips, things of that nature. Once all this work is completed, we do 100% QC of all work every time to make sure that everything is up to code, up to snuff, and then we pay contractors. This is a 100% incentive program, and not a penny comes out of the client's pocket at the time of services. So that is the single family and multifamily programs in a small nutshell. happy to answer any questions when those come up.
Thank you, Brian. I think we are going to transition now to Amanda, and we'll come back with any questions. Amanda, you ready?
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. And I think you have some slides for me, right? Great. You can go to the next one there. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amanda Formica. I work on the residential strategy team within energy efficiency for Massachusetts at National Grid. And I work very closely with Brian Biot on our income eligible programs, as Action Inc. is our lead cap agency for National Grid. So really glad that he was able to give you that overview of our income eligible program. I'm going to build on what he talked about with our other income-based offers, which is for folks who are just above that income eligible limit that he talked about. If we can go to the next slide, we have something called our moderate income offers. So the income eligible that Brian was talking about is for, as he mentioned, is for folks who are at or below 60% of state median income. We also have what is called our enhanced residential program for people who income qualify at 61 to 80% of state median income. And it's called enhanced residential program because we offer more generous incentives than our standard residential incentives that you get when you get your energy assessment. So the way that customers access the enhanced residential program is through the same type of energy assessment that they would otherwise get. So they would call our MassSave hotline or access our website, masssave.com, schedule their home energy assessment. And right on the website, you can get our free, go through our free and easy, relatively quick income verification process. So if you go to the next slide, this will show you some, these are the income limits. So Brian was talking about the income eligible program. These are all available on our website, by the way, on masssave.com. And they're renewed every year. We update these numbers and they increase as median income increases. So the income eligible program is what Brian was talking about. And then the enhanced residential program is the one where I have the green arrows pointing down on the right-hand side of each of these two columns. So for a family of 4, for example, if they have an annual income of up to almost $109,000, they would qualify for the enhanced incentives. So what is all included in that? You'll see on the next slide that, so there's the income verification, which is of course free. Weatherization, so that's the insulation and air sealing, is at 100% incentive for the home, so they don't have to pay anything for home weatherization. There's also, as of this year, we have new support for pre-weatherization barrier mitigation. So this is like knob and tube wiring, asbestos, vermiculite, a number of other different things. Knob and tube and vermiculite are 2 of the most common, and will provide up to $7,000 of support to help remediate that barrier before they are then able to go get that 100% incentive for the weatherization. And if there's any additional cost for any pre-weatherization barriers, for whatever reason that the $7,000 doesn't cover, it's designed to cover the majority of the costs for the majority of cases, but they can still access our heat loan, which is our 0% interest loan. It's a 7-year loan to cover the remainder of the cost. And then we also knew this year we have some really rich heating and cooling incentives for heating upgrades, as it says up to $20,000 for a household, which is really exciting, including for fuel switching from fossil fuels to electric for folks who want to take advantage of that. Next slide. This is just kind of more detail on the weatherization incentive. So again, 100% for the weatherization and up to $7,000 for pre-weatherization barriers. And the next slide shows you, these are some more details on the heating and cooling incentives. All of this is also available on our website. And I'm not going to kind of say what's on the slide, but essentially it can be partial or full displacement of fossil fuels to heat pumps. There can also be like for like heating systems. We do oil and propane. We also do gas, boilers and furnaces, as well as water heaters. Next slide. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. I don't think the water heaters, we don't have an enhanced incentive, but all of those heating systems, we have this enhanced incentive, and it's designed to cover about 80% of the costs, I think on average, 75% of the costs of installing a new heating system. So if you combine that with the weatherization, as we talk about here, it's the most bang for the buck is for folks in this income bracket. And in general, if you're going to be doing a heating system upgrade, we want to make sure people have their own weatherized first, just to make sure that the heating system is going to be properly designed and sized, get the maximum benefit for reducing the energy bills. And we do have some extra bonuses to ensure and to encourage people to get their homes weatherized and do their heat pumps at the same time. Next slide. And this isn't specific to moderate income or enhanced residential, but it just has some more details. There's clickable links. I'm not sure if Jenny, if you're going to be sharing the slide deck out, but these have some clickable links on here with more information about our heating comparison calculator. I think is a particularly useful tool for anybody, regardless of their income. If you're looking at changing your heating system, what all is entailed, it allows people to put some inputs in about their own home, the type of heat they have, the type of bills they get, and make a determination of what might be the best type of upgrade for them. And then we also knew we have a heat pump installer network. I've heard plenty of stories about people getting very wildly different heat pump estimates from different HVAC installers. So at least this installer network, you know that they are people who know about the rebates that we have available, who know how to size and install heat pumps, who are reliable, because there are a lot of HVAC installers out there, and we're going to continue to build out that list, but it's a good list to have for reference. Next slide. And this is just kind of this is a broad overview. Of course, we're just kind of we're focusing on our income qualifying programs with you all right now between Brian and I, but there's plenty more information on the website. And there's some different links here about the first step to get involved. And really it's encouraging folks to call and get a home energy assessment by using that phone number there, or they can access information directly at masssave.com. Next. So I also am excited to talk with you all today about some partnership opportunities that we have with the sponsors of MassSave to help encourage your residents and small businesses in your cities and towns to get involved with energy efficiency and learn more about it. So there are 4 different opportunities I will be sharing with you all today. The first one is on the next slide, is our Community First Partnership. This is a really robust program. The application deadline, I will note, is on November 4th. Right now we have a cohort in place that is partnering with us through the end of 2024. This will be the next cohort that will also be partnering with us through the end of 2024. So it'll be a 2-year partnership, up to $120,000 of support, or $60,000 a year for 2 years, depending on the level of outreach the team plans on. It's open to both municipalities and community-based organizations, or teams of municipalities and community organizations, or both. We are really targeting cities and towns that have not participated as much, that have relative, like lower than average participation in our energy efficiency programs over time, our residential energy efficiency programs. That's really the target, as well as in designated environmental justice communities. And it's a very involved program where we're providing funding for an energy advocate, which is meant to be a person who either works for the community organization or the town, or is somehow lives in or works in the communities that they're going to be doing outreach in, to help people overcome any barriers they have to accessing the energy efficiency programs. And there's more information about it there on the website. And then on the next slide, we also have a new community education grant. This is something that is much less involved than the Community First Partnership and is smaller scale. So this grants start at $5,000. We tried to make it, we know that the Community First Partnership is not going to be the best fit for all cities and towns and nonprofits. So the Community Education Grant is a really great way to partner with us to help reach more of your residents with information about energy efficiency. It can be targeted at K-12 students in schools. It can be targeted at particular populations within your community. It can support both existing and new initiatives. So take a look, there's more information there. We have 2 deadlines per year. We're gonna have another grant deadline coming up also on November 4th, but then we're gonna have 2 more grant deadlines next year and in 2024. So I encourage you to get some more information there on the link that's on the slide. And then the next slide is, so we have a lot of efforts going on related to workforce development to both grow and diversify the energy efficiency workforce in Massachusetts. We are about to launch a workforce development grant that has a lot in common with the community education grant, but it's really focused on workforce development entities in cities and towns around the state who are already engaged in workforce training, or they work with out of school youth, or they're working with folks, generally any people over 18, to help connect them with jobs, to connect them with adequate training. This one is, again, really flexible. We're going to have more details forthcoming on the link that's on there. And the grants will also really range in size, starting at $5,000, to support a wide variety of energy efficiency training and development. And that this will also have 2 grant deadlines per year over the next couple of years. And then lastly, on the next slide, we have our K-12 teacher training. I'll call out, we actually have a workshop coming up on November 1st in Lowell. It's an in-person workshop. This is something that we've been doing for many years as program sponsors. It's totally free to the teachers. They get a full day of training from our partners at the National Energy Education Development Project, or NEED, and all of the facilitators are teachers or retired teachers themselves, and they get lesson plans that they can bring back with them to the classroom on energy and energy efficiency related topics that are adaptable to all different age ranges. And we also pay for a substitute teacher for the day. They get continuing education credits that are aligned with state standards. So it's a really great opportunity. And if any of you have for your school district, if you'd like a training in person for your school district or for particular schools, if you have a big group of teachers you can bring together, they don't have to be science and technology teachers. They can be all kinds of different teachers who attend our workshops and adapt to the lesson plans to their needs. And we also offer virtual options and in-person options. So there's a link to the event calendar at NEED, but we are happy to accommodate any requests that we get from school districts or particular schools. That's it from me. Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you, Amanda. That was really great. Very helpful. I'm going to now actually hand it over to Ben Craig, who is from Mass CEC.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much. And thanks, Amanda. That was really great. I so encourage people to take advantage of those 4 partnership opportunities that Amanda was describing at the end. They're really great programs to really make sure everybody's getting served in communities. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about, well, before I jump into new construction for affordable housing and public housing, what I do want to say is that I think a lot of the agencies that provide affordable housing are very familiar with low-income housing tax credits. And I know that was sort of how this began, was a discussion about low-income housing tax credits. The state recently has made a number of changes. You know, sometimes people go in for existing buildings, like rehabbing the bathrooms and kitchens, and sometimes they're going in for new construction. And those funds are always very competitive. Usually there's 6 or 7 projects vying for each one that gets funded every year. The scoring for that has been recently revised pretty dramatically, and I just want to make sure everyone's aware of that. So the projects, the buildings that are affordable housing or public housing that are going in for, you know, the baths and kitchens, typically in the past, the scoring to figure out who gets funded and who doesn't now requires that if you get any points for green design and energy efficiency, that even in a rehab situation, you have to meet the Enterprise Green Communities mandatory requirements. And so what that means is if you're doing a rehab, you can't just do baths and kitchens anymore. You need to do sort of a base level of energy efficiency and ventilation for those projects. And so that is why you want to talk to Brian like 2 years before you go in for your low-income housing tax credits, because you want to start talking to that LEAN program about what can be provided through that program and what can be coordinated with upgrades when you have your contractor in. And then for new construction, what I want to talk about is passive house, and why that standard in particular is really good fit for new construction, affordable housing and public housing, and really honestly any multifamily in the state. So passive house is a weird term. I know people are always like scratching their heads when folks start talking about it. Passive house is actually a German standard, and in German, house really means more like building. So it's not, we're not talking about single family homes necessarily when people talk about passive house. It can be any kind of building really. And especially it works very well in the multifamily space. And that's where the incentives are right now through Mass Save. But the reason people talk about passive house a lot is that it can dramatically decrease the amount of energy needed for the building. So compared to most stretch code, new construction, multifamily, passive house, if you look at the energy modeling, you would expect between 40 and 60% less energy for every square foot of that building. It also requires much better ventilation to every room in the occupied unit as opposed to just one supply. It also results in a lot better tenant experience for folks usually. Triple glazed windows means it's quieter from the street. The apartments are compartmentalized, which means you don't smell the air from your neighbors. And then when we do have power outages, because it's sort of like a thermos, they hold their heat really well, and you don't have to move tenants out because conditions get too dangerous. So if you take a look at this photo right here, the building that looks blue, this is an infrared, and it's showing the heat escaping from various buildings on this block. One of them has been retrofitted to the passive house standard. So you can see the red is lots of heat coming out, the yellow is a little bit of heat coming out, and the blue is it's keeping its heat really, really well. So I think that's a dramatic image that shows you how different the standard can be. Next slide, please. And so Mass Save has some great incentives right now that anyone building multifamily, and especially those building affordable housing or passive house should look, or public housing should look into. And that is these passive house new construction multifamily incentives. So they provide up to $5,000 to do a feasibility study while you're still in schematics to figure out sort of what would have to change to get you to passive house certifications. They also provide up to 75% of passive house modeling, up to $20,000 per building. And this is, again, for 5 units and above of multifamily. And then if you do actually go the passive house route, there's a $3,000 per unit for passive house certification. Some of that comes at the design certification standard right before you build, and some of it comes at the very end when you get the performance that you need. Next slide. And so some people I know like are, well, 40 to 60% less energy per square foot. Really? I don't believe it necessarily, but we're already seeing the results. The left-hand side is the first passive house multifamily that was in the built in Boston. Passive house on the left-hand side is the how much energy per square foot that building is using. It's 20.8, whereas the median's 55.95. So it's 63% less. So remember how I was saying between 40 and 60% less energy? This is doing on the better end of that. Next slide. And we see this in Philadelphia again, 57% for the three compared to the others. Next slide. And perhaps even the most interesting is basically the same building built by the same affordable housing developer, 6 years apart, one that was LEED, one that's passive house, and 49% difference. And this is with the same management company, architect, everything's different, but the standard that they built it to. Next slide. And so I think a lot of people are worried that passive house is too expensive, which is true. You know, there are some additional costs. Next slide. So Mass CEC decided to try and track that as carefully as we could. So we provided some funding for 8 affordable housing projects to build to the passive house standard. And we tracked very carefully what had to change from when they went in originally without the passive house standard, and then upgrading that, how the cost estimates before construction and then all the change orders in construction. And it's been surprisingly low, honestly. We're averaging so far 2.2% increase. And, you know, that's not to say, especially in this cost market, that it's nothing. There are some changes that have to be made. What I do like is we've seen a whole bunch of different looks. You know, I think some people think passive house can only be built very modern looking, but like Harbor Village on the far left upper, that's in Gloucester, and it fits right into the main street there. Looks like a brick, you know, traditional building. North Commons in Northampton has sort of a craftsman style. So you get a lot of different looks, and the cost, I think people are learning every time we do this, how to get it less and less expensive. Next slide. So what does change? I mentioned the better ventilation. That has been the highest cost across all 8 projects that we've had. Honestly, I think after COVID, it's pretty easy to justify improving ventilation. The additional testing and verification. Basically, throughout the standard, you have to test the insulation and air sealing all along the way in order to get to those lower air infiltration numbers and that lower energy use. So that does cost a little bit more. But the trade-off is in almost all cases of the 8 that we had, there were significantly lower heating and cooling equipment sizing, and that actually saved money. So that's why that percentage number, even though like additional windows or additional testing might cost more, they also saved in the equipment costs. Next slide. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned. And I saw something in the chat about professionals who know what they're doing. I agree completely. The more, you know, we definitely see the more advanced education the design team has and the contractor has, the lower we've seen for incremental costs. But Mass Save has some great programs that offset some of the costs of getting training and certification, great offerings that are online. You know, 5 years ago, there were like 20 professionals in the state. There's over 450 now between the 2 different passive house standards. So you're getting a lot of experience. I believe last I heard there were 217 building projects that were applying for Mass Save passive house incentives. So there's a lot of teams that are learning a lot of things. Next slide. And I'm not gonna go through the details, but here's The first one that was funded through the funding that Mass CEC had in Cambridge, 98 units. Next slide. And so just what I'm trying to communicate is that for a small premium, you can build to the Passive House standard today and have significant owner and occupant health and energy benefits. Thank you. And if anyone ever has questions about affordable housing, accessing any of the funding through Mass Save, feel free to reach out. I worked in affordable housing for 15 years and always am happy to connect people.
Excellent. Thank you, Bev. I love this. I love this image on the screen.
That's an action building.
That is really?
Yes.
You have an office there, right?
That, where is that one?
What's that?
Where is that building?
It's in Gloucester, hence the big golden lobster.
Oh, that's in Gloucester. Okay.
Yep. So the copper roofed building to the left and the down bottom left, that's where our Main Street offices are. And this is a residential building located next door that we purchased.
Excellent. And one more reason to go to Gloucester. All right, Denise. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Thanks. So thanks for having me here. I'm going to talk about commercial new construction, not multifamily, but anything commercial or industrial. And I'm going to be focusing on net zero and low energy use intensity building pathway. Next slide, please. And just so you're aware that Mass Save is made up of a few different program managers. You see them here. And for the Middlesex area, it would be National Grid and Eversource primarily. Next, please. So I want to, while I'll be focusing on path one, I want to let you know we have different pathways in commercial new construction. And path one is our most lucrative, and it's also a very good fit for the types of buildings that we see with cities and towns, such as schools and libraries and police and safety buildings. So that's why I'm going to be focusing on that today with you. It is a pathway that is for buildings that are 10,000 square feet or greater. And there's an interest from the customer and the design team to really focus not only on designing at a sort of a low energy use intensity target, but also operating the building at that same target. And our path two is for larger buildings, 50,000 square feet or greater, that again, you're interested in looking at the whole building, looking at all the efficiency throughout the building. And moving on to path three is really more of a catch-all for projects that may only have a few measures in the building or that are small buildings, maybe under 10,000 square feet, but it's more of a catch-all. And so what I really want to emphasize is there is a path here for you, but I also mention the earlier that you engage Mass Save in new construction, the better, because if you get to the point where you've purchased the equipment in new construction, the pathway will no longer be available for you. So important to engage us early, even in concept or schematic design. Next, please. I think that's just going to throw that up there. So I just wanted to make sure that we understood the terms that I'll be using. And I know Bev had mentioned EUI. So EUI, in our perspective, energy use intensity, is a combination of all the energy being used in the building converted to kBTU, divided by the square foot of the building for a 1 year period. And it's similar to miles per gallon in your car, where you're able to look at the how your building is operated in terms of energy, and you're able to compare it to other like buildings, as well as compare your energy use in the same building over time. And then is the Z&E term, we basically are using the same term others are, which is it's a building that consumes as much energy as it produces in 1 year, We do focus on zero net energy ready buildings, so you don't have to have the renewable being layered on at that time. We just want to help customers get a low EUI in their building so that when it comes time to add on renewables, you don't have to add as much. Next, please. So the focus for Path 1, which again is our most lucrative pathway, is to help our customers get to a low carbon, low EUI focus in both design and in operations. So we help bring resources to the customer to help them look at how they're designing the building and how they're performing the building 1 year after, and providing incentives to do that. The key driver here is that we provide or work on a site EUI. I'll be showing you some of the energy use intensity targets that's based on building type in a few minutes. We focus on design, and we ask the customer to do different iterations of modeling in order to make sure you're focusing and everyone is reaching towards that EUI target. We also have what we call heat pump adders, so incentives that are to help support electrification that are pretty generous, and I'll show you what those are. And then we focus on operations. So 1 year after the building is designed and you've met your target in design, you would be providing information, energy information back to the program that supports how you're actually using energy in operations. And if you meet the EUI target that was set, you obtain an additional incentive. We provide some technical assistance, both in, we have a bench of zero net energy EUI consultant experts that have been working on new construction zero net energy projects across the country. So we're able to support that. We provide 50% of the cost of bringing those consultants on board, up to $10,000. We're also able to support their focus on the building, but also there might be some scope of work that might not be included in your design team's scope, such as load reduction analysis, HVAC scenario analysis, and life cycle cost analysis, which we think is all important to helping achieve a low EUI in design. And then we also have an optional verification incentive, which is an additional scope of work to help our customers actually achieve the low EUI reduction that they are designing towards. And we will pay 50% up to $10,000 for that additional scope of work. And I'll get into a few more details. Next, please. So this gives you an example of the different building types that we have established energy use intensity targets. We have tier 1 and tier 2, as you see in this chart. The tier 1 targets, the EUI targets, are the lowest for hotel. You have K through 12 schools, libraries, offices, fire, police stations, and then site-specific that might not be included in these building categories. And the highest incentive is for our tier 1, which is the lowest EUI. So the lower the EUI, the higher incentive, because the more energy you'd be saving. And then if for some reason you and your design team felt you couldn't actually meet that lowest EUI target, then tier 2 is a possibility, which is a little bit higher EUI, and the incentives are a little bit lower. I'm going to encourage folks to, especially for Path 1, to come in early and talk with us at concept schematic design, because after 100% design development on a project, you're not able to come into this pathway. Reason being, if you haven't designed your building in order to be a zero net energy building or zero net energy ready, it's really hard to sort of backpedal and make changes needed in the design in order to achieve those goals. So we really cap it at 100% design development. Next, please. So I wanted to give you sort of the lay of the land with the incentives, because it is sort of adding a lot of things together. We have, this is an example with the public safety, fire and police buildings that we've seen a lot of. And as you can see here, tier 1, you would focus on 35 EUI or less. You'd achieve $2 a square foot if you met that EUI target in design. If you added heat pumps, we have what we call heat pump adders, air source heat pumps. We provide $800 a ton. So we're paying on a ton basis versus a square footage basis that I just mentioned for construction incentives. And there's for VRF, we pay $1,200 a ton, and ground source heat pumps, we're paying $4,500 a ton. So very rich incentives here that will probably, that are getting people's attentions. And then after you've finished designing the building and you've provided documentation that you've achieved the EUI target that you've set, then you run the building for 1 year, a post-occupancy time period. We agree on, when the steady state is, and then you run the building for a year. After that year period of time, you provide back information on the energy that you used in order to show what EUI you're actually operating the building at. And if you achieve the EUI target that you have set and designed the building for, we will pay you an additional $1.50 a square foot. And if you actually go lower, we give you a little bit more. And there is also a certification incentive, sort of a stipend to help you if you're interested in actually certifying the building as zero net energy. Next, please. So I had mentioned a verification incentive that is, a voluntary optional incentive, and it's for a scope of work to help the customer after the design has been built, your design has been completed, your building has been built, and this is to help to do some audits, energy audits along the way. And it's for a scope of work that would pull data at 2 months, 6 months, 12 months, in order to make sure that you're actually following and able to reach the EUI target that you designed for. And they're able to flag issues and do some course corrections, because we don't want you to be surprised at the end of 1 year that you might not have reached the EUI target, and that your $1.50 in incentives a square foot would be at jeopardy. We want to make sure you're informed along the way. This is our effort to try to get some help to do that. And we pay 50% up to $10,000 for scope of work to do that. Next, please. And that's really it. I provided all of the names of the project administrators across the state, but it will probably be, just reach out to me, Denise Rouleau, and then Kim Cullinan would also be the Eversource contact. And thank you very much. That's it.
That's excellent. Thank you so much, Denise. All right, so now I'm wondering if all of the panelists could come back on screen. Amanda. Maybe. There you are. Okay. I would love to now kind of talk a little bit. Maybe we can start with actually what was in the chat. There was a little back and forth happening in the chat. Would one of you like to, I think there were some responses, but we can certainly update the slide deck with some of those additional resources and information. But Amanda, you had provided the first response, and then I think Bev as well. Do you want to, would you like to share the question and a response as well in the chat? so people can hear.
Sure.
And Brian, did you want to say something first?
Yeah, I just to throw in, there was a comment about construction supervisor license, and I've been a construction supervisor license holder for, I don't know, about 14 years now. So just to comment on that really quickly, when you go to renew, you have to have CEUs. I'm not sure that it's fair to make all CSL holders take a test on Passive House in order to renew their construction supervisor license, as not every person holding that is involved in Passive House building. Think somebody who specializes in decks or masonry or interior decorating, for instance. But I think that, in order to raise awareness and get more tradespeople involved in Passive House is absolutely a good thing. So just a comment on the question.
Thank you, Brian. And the comment that was in the chat, just to read it so people who are viewing this can know what we're talking about. Passive House standards require that builders are capable and aware. Most builders quote, higher initial cost of build, degraded air quality and such. There is a lack of education amongst the contractors. Could contractor license renewal include a quote unquote requirement to pass a test that dispels miscommunication, lack of understanding, and how to present it to the buyer that may feel high initial cost versus total cost? So Amanda, do you, thank you for that addition, Brian. Amanda, do you want to add a little bit more to share your response, and Bev as well? Please.
Sure, just and thanks, Bev, for the additions in the chat. I realized for folks who are watching the recording, you may not have seen what's in the chat, but so as program administrators for Mass Save, we're as the sponsors of Mass Save, we don't have control over what kinds of tests people have to take in order to get their licenses renewed, et cetera. But starting over 3 years ago now, we've had in the market an extensive Passive House workforce development effort. Passive House and now all electric new construction for our new low rise new construction, all electric new construction offer. And Bev mentioned we do partner with Passive House Massachusetts on those workshops. They are free. We have many of them on demand. We can offer them if you know of any architects, contractors, engineers, realtors, any types of firms that might be in your city or town. If you want to host something in person, we're happy to connect you. Between Bev and I, we did put some links in the chat, and it sounds like Jenny will be able to connect folks with those afterwards. We want to make sure that we are educating the market, and we're seeing really good results. I know Bev went into a lot of the details, but we're seeing really good uptake in Passive House, which is really encouraging.
Yeah, and I mean, kudos to Mass Save, because they've been paying for half the cost of people to get certifications for Passive House Builder and Certified Passive House Consultant. And I think 5 years ago, there might have been 20 trained professionals in the state. I was just looking, and there's over 500 now. That's really impressive change. And yeah, we haven't, that's really, I think, more the architects, mechanical engineers, site supers that are getting that formal training. And I do agree that the construction supervisor license, the energy options for CEUs, we definitely want to try and use those as much as we can. I know Mass Save, the folks who are doing the Passive House training, really wanted to do a lot of hands-on stuff, and we're like gearing up for that right when COVID hit. So it's a little tough because you can't really do things, can't build mock-ups too well in the middle of COVID when you're social distancing. But there's some really great content for, carpenters, window installers that's on the Passive House Mass, and there's like an energy efficiency contractor video library basically. And I think all that's relevant, single family to multi-family. It's like the details you need to know if you're in the construction business, if you want to do anything high performance. So I do encourage people to look at that. And the other thing I will say is there's a lot of workforce training money right now in the state. And in particular, I think a lot of builders are feeling like there's not enough workforce out there. Most of the vocational schools in the state are now open for weekends and night courses in carpentry, HVAC, and electrical. So those are places to reach out to folks. And also I think we're going to be trying to get more of this high performance curriculum in those, so that anybody can take them. And I did put something in there, a course that, so for existing workforce at, a general contractor, for example, that might want to take hands-on stuff, the state does have workforce training funds of up to $30,000 per year for companies under 100 employees. And that includes the course that I put in the chat, that's the high performance for carpenters. That is, you basically build mock-ups once a week for 4 hours for 6 weeks. And it's just great for the hands-on detail kind of learning that we need for retrofitting existing homes and also building these newer, really high performance buildings.
That's excellent. Brian, did you want to add something about?
Yeah, just to chime in on that, like Bev makes an excellent point. It's because, the techs and the installers who are actually doing this work, it's really imperative that they have a good understanding and a good knowledge of how the building systems work, because a lot of this stuff, it has to be done right the first time, because if it's not, it becomes very, very expensive to disassemble things and fix small errors where air tightness and building leakage occurs. So yeah, training is of the utmost importance for hands-on and for people actually doing the installation and building.
Excellent. And there was an additional comment in this same thread of, it would be good for Mass DEC PAs to reach out to architect agencies to also provide this training on high performance homes, including commercial. Thank you for those comments and the questions and the dialogue that we just had. Are there other questions from people participating? You can also raise your hand or unmute yourself. You don't have to put it in the chat now that we're at the Q&A part.
This is Denise. I had a question for Amanda.
Okay.
I had seen that you had grants and that started at $5,000. What are the ranges? And that was in workforce development and another kind of grant. I can't remember off the top of my head. What's the range? I think people might be interested in understanding that.
Yeah, that would be particularly helpful to understand the income and how that relates to the Greater Lowell as well.
Sure, and I will note that Lowell is part of the Community First Partnership. There's a list of the cities and towns who are participating on the link that I shared in the slide there for Community First Partnership. I don't remember offhand, I'm sorry, Jenny, I don't remember offhand the North Middlesex COGS territory to be able to say who else in your territory, in your area is participating. But Denise, to answer your question, yes, the grants start at $5,000 for both our community education grant and our workforce development grant. The top of the range I think that we'll entertain is probably about 50,000. We have a lot of requirements in place and with the Community First Partnership, and that's $60,000 a year. So partly to be fair and also to the applicants for all of those programs, and also to be able to spread the love, spread the wealth across as many teams as we can. I would encourage kind of the smaller side. So we're seeing a lot at 10, 15, 20,000 that we're looking at for the education grant. Yep.
And I'll just add a few more things. If there's a lot of interest in workforce development, I was surprised by how much interest. That's really great. I'm so glad to hear it because we need this. Mass DEC has a few resources as well. So first I will say, like, we're in the process of trying to understand, now that we have a goal of getting to net zero by 2050, and I know a lot of the communities in this area have similar climate action plans, what kinds of jobs are going to see the most growth within, the short term and then in the long term. And one thing I will say is it's very, very clear, and I don't think most people realize this, that the #1 job created will be electrician. We probably need 4 to 6 times as many as we have today. And that is not usually that's not a college path. It's an apprenticeship path. It's fairly long, but it pays pays well while you're an apprentice, and it pays very well when you're done, and probably only better as we have more demand for this. So that's like one of those areas. And then I think, Mass Save's providing some pretty generous electrification incentives, which means heat pumps as a specialty within HVAC is another one of those areas. So that's just sort of like big picture stuff. Mass CEC does has just started offering, we've only made one series of awards, but about every 6 months, I think there's going to be an opportunity for $50,000 planning grants for organizations that might want to pair up with organizations that help train some of these higher. So maybe it's like a high performance carpentry program at a vocational school with somebody who can help, bring in resources for people to become ready for that technical training. So for example, driver's licenses. If you're going to be working in HVAC in the residential market and you don't have a driver's license, you might need to get driver's license training before you do a technical training around heat pumps and get that job. So organizations interested in sort of finding the umbrella of organizations that are going to be needed to bring in the employers who are going to hire the people outside of the training program, develop that program, the support services, the mentoring that's probably needed on the job the first couple years. They should think about applying to our planning grants. Just about any kind of organization is eligible. And really the purpose is to help you write a long-term grant application for running that program for much bigger money. So I think that's a good entry place for organizations and cities and towns that are interested in getting more up to speed on sort of capturing state resources that are available for this workforce training money. And then
I'm glad that you brought that up. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Well, the one other thing I want to mention is, especially because I know there's a lot of minority-owned businesses in this region, is that Mass CEC has funded a number of organizations to stand up programs to support minority and women-owned businesses in gaining expertise in these fields and expanding. And so some of that's to actually do work like, Brian's group or some of the CAP agencies and the pipelines associated with those. But anyone who's interested in the organizations that have been funded, I think, there's some contractor training academies that are starting right now through Emerald Cities Collaborative. That's like a night program, a little bit of time, but can really set you up well. So feel free to connect folks with me about that, and I can put them in touch with the right people.
That's great, really helpful. Amanda, do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to talk. Well, there were a lot of things we could have talked about today that were and Bev, you were bringing some of them up on workforce development. We, the program sponsors of Mass Save, we work really closely with the Clean Energy Center, and we actually have $12 million a year going to the Clean Energy Center from energy efficiency ratepayer dollars as of this year as of last year for equity and workforce development initiatives that are some of what I think Bev was just talking about. We also have some supplier diversity summits that we are organizing to help minority and women-owned businesses to know how to do business with the Mass Save programs. So if you know of any businesses in your communities, we can follow up with some more information. Those are going to be in Westwood and in Worcester on November 8th and 10th next month. We're going to be doing them twice annually in different places.
We can also share those resources or that information as a follow-up when we send the slide deck and this recording. Are there other questions from anybody participating? One question that the panelists had for people participating was whether or not there are any upcoming larger development projects or development projects in general, construction, which could potentially leverage the incentives and other things that were discussed today. And I don't know if a couple of people who are here might want to share anything. If you do know of any upcoming projects, that was one of the questions that we had for people participating. If not, that's okay too. Not hearing anything. So I would say, I know that we do have a lot of different development projects in the region. And so we can certainly make sure to follow up on that, as well as, again, ask folks who are participating in the various communities, green community programs, for their input as well. We are getting one response in the chat about a big development, but I don't know what that specifically is. UMass West Chelmsford, right? 250 Princeton. It's a larger multifamily complex that's being developed. Formerly UMass Lowell property.
So like, I don't think there's a downside to getting the feasibility study money for Passive House for that and the modeling. There's no downside, right? Like they don't have to go forward, and it'll make the architects a lot more aware of the air infiltration, even if, and how important that is, even if they don't go for Passive House. So I would definitely recommend for that one. The other thing that I would say is none of these towns and cities should be building any schools or libraries without taking advantage of the Path 1 net zero incentive. Like this is where we have to go as a state, and they're really generous incentives, and the framework really fits perfectly for keeping you on target. So, you know, every school board should know, every library committee, and then the schools that need to be rehabbed, if it's going to be a gut, they would be eligible, I think, right, Denise, for that program as well. So there's a lot of
go down to the studs pretty much, or, you know, change of use, things like that. I mean, we have some more specific criteria, but yeah, if you're pulling everything out, it would qualify.
Yeah, it's worth noting for our program also that we are chiefly a retrofit program, and you know, all of our work typically takes place in inhabited buildings. So not new construction, not vacant places that are you know, have no residents living in them. Small differentiation.
But I do think also, I mean, Denise, you probably know better than me, there's going to be a deep energy retrofit commercial too. So say a school that isn't going to the studs, there may be soon a new path for people as well, for people to watch. Yeah. So
and very new, I'm just learning about it now. It's been under development. So you're right. You know, keep your eyes open and ears open for it.
Also new paths under development for income eligible multifamily. If it's a building that already exists, we're gonna have some stuff similar to what Denise was saying earlier. So if the building is looking at 40% or more on-site energy reduction, having a deep energy retrofit path, so we're able to help support some of that additional work that a developer about a housing authority or town might be doing with affordable housing.
That's great.
And I think the point is,
sorry, one second. The other comment in the chat is that Westford, for example, has several projects with municipal buildings, including a library expansion, and they're also building affordable housing. I think most of that is new construction. And then also we have 7 of our 9 communities are technically MBTA communities, meaning they need to be compliant with the new MBTA communities law by adopting zoning for by right multifamily housing, at least 15 units per acre. And Chelmsford is looking at that. Oops, that was Carlisle, I guess, with the several building projects. Oh, Carlisle is looking at a public safety building, got it. But Westford is, as well as Chelmsford and a number of our other communities, our MBTA communities, was the point I was trying to make, which means that they'll need to build multifamily housing. There is, you know, some possibility that some of that new housing could be, certainly should be, working towards, you know, energy efficiency, but it is not mandatory under the law. But I think that there's opportunities to unite a lot of these programs with those initiatives. Sorry, Bev, go ahead now.
Yeah, I just want to encourage you guys work with a lot of the municipal folks and just making sure that you help spread the word about this. It's hard for, I think, all of us as agencies to get the word to the right people. So like you guys are in a much better position, honestly, to make sure that they're aware of this kind of stuff and send them to the right ones of us when it's relevant.
Yes, exactly. That was actually the one question that I had for all of you, which is sort of, some of our communities are doing net zero action planning or climate action plans and are thinking about, at least their municipal buildings, but also looking at, which was the point of this conversation, how to also deal with transitioning buildings from gas or oil to electric or net zero options. And as part of that transition, it would apply to private residential or commercial buildings or other, industrial buildings. Who knows? Could be a lot of other potential uses. And as part of all of that, where would you say communities should start? It seemed like all of you started with some sort of audit or energy assessment or something of that nature. Could one or any of you sort of answer that? Where to begin? That's sort of, a lot of the communities have a lot of ideas, but have not necessarily begun to do them. And just one last thing is, one of you made a point about how challenging it is to start a public facility project and then think about adding on, some sort of net zero component to it or an element, or, suddenly deciding to do some sort of significant change that can be very costly and maybe even impossible. So it's really important to think about it early. Denise, if you want to.
Yeah, I'd like to just jump in for a minute. At National Grid, we have municipal energy efficiency reps that are assigned to each town that National Grid is in. So usually, because they're working so closely with the cities and towns, you would know who those folks are. So they're a good person to really connect with about anything. They can point you in the right direction. New construction, they would point you to me. So if you do have a new construction project that is National Grid in some fashion, just come to me. We work collaboratively with Eversource and other PAs. So I would bring in the right folks. If there are other, PAs that need to be included. Also, I just want to mention from a retrofit standpoint, because, not everything's new construction. There are some very lucrative heat pump incentives that are in place for retrofit commercial buildings. So you should be aware of that. They're a little higher with the exception of ground source heat pump than what I mentioned. So I think it's $2,500 for air source heat pump. I could be wrong on this. $3,500 for VRF, and the same ground source heat pump at $4,500 a ton. And you should just be aware that those are there. And if you have any interest, it's our effort to help electrify. And so you can reach out to the municipal reps, or you could reach out to me and I can help get you to the right person from a retrofit standpoint. But they're usually very connected to the cities and towns.
Thanks, Denise. And I think Melanie, or perhaps Melanie, yes, could also add on to this piece about heat pumps, which was a question that was also in the chat. Melanie, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Apologies for being a little bit late for this meeting. So I think that the question, if I'm not mistaken, is about ground source heat pumps and backup systems. Is that the question you're referring to? I can't see any of the chat before I joined, but.
Sorry, okay. I believe this was to Amanda.
I got it. So I got a direct question about ground source heat pump and backup natural gas. What kind of incentive level it qualifies for in residential?
Sure. So if you or if a customer is planning on fully replacing their central gas heating system, they are eligible for a $15,000 rebate. They must sign a whole home heat pump form, which is a self-attestation saying that you'll only use the backup system. If you're not actually removing it or disconnecting it, you're only going to use that backup system in emergency situations. If you don't sign that form, you are not, or I say you, the customer is not eligible for that full home rebate, but eligible for the partial rebate, which is $2,000 per ton. Just want to double check that. Yep, $2,000 per ton. And something else I should mention is that in order to be eligible for that whole home heat pump rebate, whether it's ground source or air source, the customer must demonstrate sufficient weatherization. So just keep that in mind. and that can be either getting a home energy assessment and then installing weatherization measures that were recommended, or if your home was built after, I think it's 2001, it's considered adequately weatherized just due to building code. And also if the customer has installed weatherization measures since 2013, they also qualify and as sufficiently weatherized. So sorry if I just repeated anything that was previously said before I joined. But
I just want to see if there are other questions that we might want to answer, or if there's anything else lingering.
If I may, I'd like to address heat pumps in the income eligible program real quickly.
Please.
So in the single family program, we are actively replacing and retrofitting houses with air source heat pumps. Right now we are targeting electric resistance baseboard and delivered fuels, i.e. propane and oil. Ideally, we are looking for a whole home displacement, and we are doing that in concert with a full weatherization package. We're also doing this air source heat pump retrofits in multifamily program. Again, displacing electric resistance baseboard and delivered fuel sites, propane and oil. And in the multifamily program, we're also doing complete retrofit. So full displacement of the existing fossil fuel or resistance baseboard.
That's really great to hear. I think that the number of options and opportunities that have been shared this afternoon are really phenomenal. Massachusetts is obviously a clear leader in thinking about these programs and actually funding them and providing the resources with many talented individuals available to be a resource to our municipalities, including the people participating in this conversation today. So I really appreciate you sharing your time and talent with all of us. And I'm just very excited about the number of options and hoping that we can connect all of our communities with those opportunities. I think I'm going to wrap up now. And so Daniela, if you want to put the PowerPoint back up one more time.
So this is just a compilation of all the resources that have been mentioned, or some of the resources that have been mentioned in these presentations. We'll definitely update this and before we send it out as a resource for everyone to access. Okay.
Excellent. And we'll also make sure that it's hyperlinked. I think that was one comment, so that people can actively, use this PowerPoint and go to the additional resources or sign up for additional events. So thank you again for attending, and if there's any follow-up from either myself or with Daniela, please feel free to reach out. We look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a nice day, everybody.